You're replaceable. That's what Gregory Thornton said on June 18, 2024 at 3:15 p.m. in his executive office at Thornton Manufacturing, leaning against his mahogany desk with his arms crossed while I stood holding a folder containing 15 years of client contracts, supplier relationships, and operational documentation that had kept his family's company profitable through 2 recessions and a pandemic. The afternoon sunlight through his floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated the framed photos on his walls: his father who'd founded the company in 1987, his grandfather who'd built the original factory, 3 generations of Thorntons who'd believed that manufacturing success came from family legacy rather than from the non-family employees who actually ran the operations. I'd been director of supply chain and logistics at Thornton Manufacturing for 15 years, 3 months, and 12 days, managing $47 million in annual supplier contracts, coordinating shipments to 340 clients across 18 states, and building the relationships that meant our raw materials arrived on time and our finished products reached customers when promised. And Gregory, who'd inherited the CEO position from his father 18 months earlier at age 38 with an undergraduate degree in business administration and 0 manufacturing experience, had decided that my request for a salary adjustment from $94,000 to $115,000 to match market rates for supply chain directors with my experience level was an opportunity to remind me that I was just an employee and he was the owner. I'm Jennifer Hayes, and I stood in that office knowing exactly what the non-compete agreement I'd signed in 2009 actually said: employees shall not solicit Thornton Manufacturing clients or suppliers for a period of 2 years following termination of employment, and knowing that solicit had a specific legal definition that didn't include clients and suppliers choosing to follow me to a new company after Thornton Manufacturing service quality declined following my departure. 15 years, 3 months, and 12 days of negotiating supplier contracts that saved Thornton an average of $340,000 annually, building client relationships that generated repeat business worth $12 million per year, managing logistics that maintained a 98.7% on-time delivery rate, and coordinating the supply chain operations that let a mid-sized manufacturing company compete with larger firms that had more resources and bigger logistics departments. And Gregory had decided that asking for a 22% salary increase after 15 years at the same base compensation was evidence that I didn't understand my value to the company. I wasn't the chief operating officer who set strategic direction and reported to the board, or the VP of sales who closed new business and attended industry conferences. I drove a 2015 Honda CR-V with 168,934 miles and a back seat containing sample cases from suppliers I'd visited to verify quality before signing contracts, because understanding what you're buying means knowing whether suppliers can actually deliver what they promise. I lived in a 920-square-foot townhouse in suburban Indiana with a home office containing filing cabinets full of supplier agreements, client contracts, shipping documentation, and correspondence with the 140-plus companies I'd built relationships with over 15 years, relationships that existed because I returned calls promptly, solved problems quickly, and kept commitments consistently. I was methodical about documentation, careful about contract terms, and protective of the relationships that made Thornton Manufacturing supply chain function reliably, and apparently Gregory thought these characteristics made me replaceable, rather than the person whose institutional knowledge and industry relationships are worth significantly more than $94,000 annually. I joined Thornton Manufacturing in March 2009, during the financial crisis when manufacturing companies were struggling to survive and many were laying off staff rather than hiring. Thornton was a family-owned manufacturer of industrial metal components, brackets, housings, fasteners, and custom parts for machinery manufacturers, automotive suppliers, and construction equipment companies. The company employed 84 people and generated approximately $28 million in annual revenue. My role as supply chain coordinator was to manage relationships with raw material suppliers, coordinate production schedules with customer delivery requirements, arrange freight and logistics, and ensure that materials arrived when needed and finished products shipped when promised. It was operational work that required understanding both the technical requirements of what we manufactured and the business relationships that made supply chains function. The supply chain director who'd hired me, Robert Chin, who'd been with Thornton for 23 years, retired in 2011, and I was promoted to director of supply chain and logistics at age 32 with a salary increase from $58,000 to $72,000. The promotion came with responsibility for managing all supplier contracts, all client logistics arrangements, and a small team of 3 coordinators who handled day-to-day operations. Over the next 13 years, I built Thornton's supply chain into a competitive advantage. I negotiated long-term contracts with steel suppliers that locked in favorable pricing and guaranteed availability during market shortages. I developed relationships with specialty material suppliers who could provide unusual alloys and configurations that larger manufacturers couldn't get quickly. I built freight and logistics partnerships that gave us priority handling and competitive rates. I created client service systems that let customers track their orders in real time and get accurate delivery estimates. These weren't dramatic innovations. They were consistent execution of supply chain fundamentals: know your suppliers, understand your clients, maintain reliable processes, and build relationships based on delivering what you promise. But consistent execution over 15 years created value that wasn't easily visible to executives who didn't work in supply chain operations daily. By 2024, Thornton Manufacturing was generating $47 million in annual revenue. The company had grown from 84 employees to 127 employees. The client base had expanded from about 180 customers to 340 customers. On-time delivery rate was 98.7%, better than most competitors. Supplier relationships were strong enough that during the 2021 to 2022 supply chain disruptions that crippled many manufacturers, Thornton maintained access to raw materials because our long-term contracts and strong supplier relationships meant we weren't competing in spot markets with companies that had weaker supplier partnerships. My salary had increased from $72,000 in 2011 to $94,000 in 2024, a total increase of $22,000 over 13 years, or approximately $1,692 annually. Meanwhile, market rates for supply chain directors with my experience level and company size had increased to $115,000 to $135,000 according to industry salary surveys. I was being paid approximately 25 to 30% below market rate for my role. I'd raised this issue with Thomas Thornton, Gregory's father and the previous CEO, in 2022. Thomas had acknowledged that my compensation was below market but explained that Thornton was a family company with limited resources and that he appreciated my loyalty and long-term commitment. He'd offered a $6,000 increase to $88,000, which I'd accepted because I understood family companies had different constraints than corporate employers. Thomas retired in January 2023 at age 67. His son Gregory took over as CEO. Gregory was 38 years old, had worked at Thornton for 9 years in various sales and business development roles, and had been groomed to eventually run the company. He had a business degree from a regional university, no formal training in manufacturing or supply chain management, and strong opinions about how Thornton should modernize and optimize to compete more effectively. Our first significant interaction after Gregory became CEO was in March 2023, when he called a meeting to discuss operational efficiency opportunities. Present were Gregory, the CFO, the operations manager, and me. Gregory opened with a presentation about how Thornton's cost structure was higher than industry benchmarks and how we needed to identify savings opportunities in procurement and logistics. He showed slides comparing Thornton's supplier costs to published industry averages and suggested that we were overpaying for raw materials. "Jennifer, why are we paying 8% above market average for steel?" Gregory asked, pointing to a slide. "We're not paying above market average," I replied. "We're paying slightly above spot market prices in exchange for guaranteed availability and priority allocation during shortages." The contracts I negotiated in 2019 and 2020 locked in pricing and supply commitments. During the 2021 to 2022 supply disruptions, those contracts meant we had raw materials when competitors couldn't get steel. The market average you're showing includes companies buying spot market steel, which is cheaper when supply is abundant but unavailable when supply is tight. "But right now supply is abundant," Gregory said. "We could save money by renegotiating to spot market pricing." "Right now, yes. But supply conditions change. Long-term contracts provide stability and supply security. If we renegotiate to spot pricing and supply tightens again, we'll be competing for materials with no guaranteed allocation. That's a risk we can manage," Gregory said. "The savings opportunity is significant, approximately $180,000 annually if we optimize procurement. I didn't argue further in that meeting. I simply noted that changing procurement strategy would affect supplier relationships and supply reliability, and that any savings analysis should include risk assessment for supply disruption scenarios. Over the next year, Gregory pushed for various optimization initiatives that I professionally disagreed with. He wanted to consolidate suppliers to get volume discounts, even though our multi-supplier strategy provided redundancy and competitive leverage. He wanted to reduce inventory levels to improve cash flow, even though our inventory buffers prevented production delays when shipments were late. He wanted to switch freight carriers based purely on cost without considering reliability and customer service factors that affected delivery performance. I implemented some of his requests where I thought they were operationally sound. I pushed back on requests that I believed would create supply chain risks. And I documented everything: the requests, my analysis, the outcomes, and the trade-offs involved in each decision. By early 2024, I was increasingly concerned about Gregory's approach to supply chain management. He viewed the supply chain as a cost center to be minimized rather than as a strategic capability to be developed. He made decisions based on spreadsheet analysis without understanding operational contexts. And he seemed to regard my 15 years of experience as less valuable than his recent business degree and his position as owner. In May 2024, I researched market compensation for supply chain directors at comparable manufacturing companies. The data showed that directors managing similar revenue volumes, client counts, and team sizes were earning $115,000 to $135,000. I was earning $94,000, approximately 25% below market rates. I scheduled a meeting with Gregory on June 18, 2024 to discuss compensation adjustment. I prepared a presentation showing my 15 years of service, the value I'd created through supplier negotiations and client relationships, market salary data for comparable roles, and a request for adjustment to $115,000 to bring my compensation in line with market rates. The meeting started at 3 p.m. in Gregory's office. I presented my case methodically: 15 years of service, measurable cost savings from supplier negotiations, client retention rates, on-time delivery performance, and market compensation data showing I was underpaid relative to peers. Gregory listened for approximately 10 minutes before interrupting. "Jennifer, I appreciate your service to Thornton. But I need to be direct with you. This company has been too comfortable for too long. My father ran Thornton like a family, and that created a culture where people expected loyalty to be rewarded with job security and gradual pay increases regardless of market pressures. I'm running Thornton like a business. That means compensation is based on market value, and market value is determined by replaceability. Market value data shows directors at my experience level earning $115,000 to $135,000, I said. I'm requesting the lower end of that range. Those are market rates for directors who are difficult to replace, Gregory replied. You've been here 15 years. You know our systems well. But supply chain work is fundamentally transactional: managing contracts, coordinating shipments, maintaining supplier relationships. Those are skills that any competent supply chain professional can develop within 6 to 12 months. You're replaceable. And replaceable employees don't command premium salaries. I sat there for approximately 5 seconds processing what he just said. 15 years of building relationships, negotiating contracts, and creating the supply chain reliability that let Thornton compete effectively, and Gregory had decided that all of it could be replicated by any competent supply chain professional within a year. If you believe I'm replaceable, I said carefully, then you should replace me with someone willing to work for $94,000. But I don't believe you'll find someone with my industry relationships, supplier knowledge, and client connections who will work for below market compensation. Then we disagree about your market value, Gregory said. The answer is no. Your compensation remains at $94,000. If you're unhappy with that, you're welcome to explore other opportunities. But I should remind you that you signed a non-compete agreement that prevents you from working for competitors or soliciting Thornton's clients and suppliers. I'm aware of the non-compete terms, I replied. Good. Then you understand that your options are limited. You're replaceable here, and you're restricted from working elsewhere in this industry. I'd suggest you consider that before making demands about compensation. I left Gregory's office at 3:22 p.m., drove to my townhouse in my CRV with 168,934 miles, and sat in my home office surrounded by 15 years of supplier agreements, client contracts, and industry relationships that Gregory thought could be replicated by anyone within a year. Now about 58% of you think I'm about to quit immediately and start competing with Thornton despite the non-compete agreement, and you're partially right but mostly wrong. Subscribe right now, because what actually happens is that I do resign after realizing Gregory doesn't value my contributions, and I do start working for another company, but I don't violate the non-compete terms. I don't solicit anyone. Instead, suppliers and clients independently choose to follow me because supply chain relationships are built on trust and performance, not company loyalty, and when Thornton's service quality declines after my departure, those relationships move to where the service quality is better. Then Thornton sues me for $3 million claiming I violated the non-compete, and the court has to decide whether clients and suppliers choosing to work with me at my new company counts as solicitation or just natural consequences of Gregory replacing an irreplaceable person with someone who couldn't maintain the relationships I'd built over 15 years. I resigned from Thornton Manufacturing on June 25, 2024, giving 4 weeks' notice as required by my employment agreement. My resignation letter was professional and brief. After 15 years of service, I have decided to pursue other opportunities. My last day will be July 23, 2024. I will ensure thorough transition of responsibilities and documentation. Gregory accepted my resignation without attempting to negotiate or retain me. He assigned my replacement, a supply chain manager named Kyle Patterson, who'd been hired from a logistics company 3 months earlier, to shadow me during my final 4 weeks to learn the role. Kyle was 31 years old, had 6 years of supply chain experience, and was earning $78,000 annually, $16,000 less than I'd been making. He was competent at the technical aspects of supply chain work but had no existing relationships with Thornton suppliers or clients, no history in the industrial manufacturing sector, and no institutional knowledge about why certain processes existed or how certain situations should be handled. I spent my final 4 weeks documenting everything I could. I created spreadsheets listing all supplier contacts, contract terms, pricing agreements, and relationship history. I documented all client logistics arrangements, special handling requirements, and service level commitments. I wrote procedures for managing supply disruptions, resolving shipping problems, and coordinating with production schedules. But I couldn't document relationships. I couldn't transfer 15 years of credibility with suppliers who trusted me to honor commitments. I couldn't replicate the client connections that meant when problems occurred, customers called me directly because they knew I'd fix issues quickly. I couldn't teach Kyle the contextual knowledge about which suppliers were reliable under pressure, which clients needed extra attention, and which situations required personal intervention rather than standard procedures. My last day was July 23, 2024. I cleaned out my office, turned in my building access card, and left Thornton Manufacturing after 15 years, 3 months, and 12 days of service. I'd already accepted a position as Director of Supply Chain Operations at Midwest Industrial Solutions, a manufacturing company 60 miles from Thornton that produced similar industrial components but served different market segments. The role paid $125,000 annually, a 33% increase from my Thornton's salary, and came with equity participation in the company. Midwest Industrial was owned by Mark Davidson, who'd worked in manufacturing for 30 years and understood that supply chain operations were strategic capabilities rather than transactional functions. When I interviewed with him, I'd explained my situation at Thornton, my non-compete restrictions, and my commitment to honoring those restrictions completely. I can't solicit Thornton's clients or suppliers, I'd told him. The non-compete is clear about that. But if clients or suppliers independently choose to work with Midwest Industrial after discovering I'm here, that's their business decision, not my solicitation. Agreed, Mark had said. We won't ask you to violate your non-compete. But we also won't turn away business from companies that want to work with us because they value your expertise and relationships. I started at Midwest Industrial on July 29, 2024, 6 days after leaving Thornton. I spent my first 2 weeks learning Midwest systems, understanding their current supplier base, and reviewing their client relationships. I did not contact any Thornton suppliers or clients. I did not announce my new position on LinkedIn or other social media. I simply started doing my job at my new company. What I didn't do was prevent suppliers and clients from contacting me. In the first week of August, I received a call from James Murphy, the sales director at Allegheny Steel, one of Thornton's primary raw material suppliers. James and I had worked together for 12 years. I'd negotiated multiple long-term contracts with Allegheny that had provided Thornton with reliable steel supply through 2 market disruptions. "Jennifer, I heard you left Thornton," James said. "Where did you land?" "Midwest Industrial Solutions," I replied. "Similar work, different company. Are they looking for steel suppliers?" "We'd be interested in working with Midwest if they need a reliable partner." "I can't solicit supplier relationships from Thornton," I said carefully. "But if you want to reach out to the Midwest independently to discuss potential business, that's your decision." "Understood. I'll contact Midwest's purchasing department directly." Similar conversations happened with other suppliers over the next 3 weeks. They'd heard I'd left Thornton. They asked where I was working. I told them. Some of them independently contacted Midwest Industrial to discuss potential supplier relationships. I did not encourage them. I did not suggest they stop working with Thornton. I simply answered their questions honestly and let them make their own business decisions about who they wanted to work with. Client contacts followed a similar pattern. In late August, I received a call from David Chen, the purchasing manager at Precision Manufacturing, one of Thornton's long-term clients. David's company had been buying components from Thornton for 8 years, and I'd managed their account personally for that entire period. "Jennifer, we've been having problems with Thornton since you left," David said. "Deliveries are late. When we call with questions, we get transferred between people who don't know our account. Last week we received the wrong parts and it took 3 days to get it resolved. This never happened when you were there." "I'm sorry you're experiencing issues," I said. "I can't comment on Thornton's current operations." "Are you taking new clients at Midwest Industrial?" "We are. But I should tell you that I have a non-compete agreement that prevents me from soliciting Thornton's clients. If you want to explore working with Midwest, you'd need to contact us independently, and that would be your business decision, not my solicitation." "I understand. I'll reach out to Midwest's sales team." This pattern repeated with multiple clients over September and October 2024. Thornton's service quality declined after my departure. Clients experienced late deliveries, communication problems, and service issues that hadn't occurred when I was managing supply chain operations. Some of those clients independently contacted Midwest Industrial to explore alternative suppliers. I did not solicit them. I did not badmouth Thornton. I simply let them make their own decisions about where to source their components based on which supplier provided better service. By November 2024, Midwest Industrial had gained approximately $4.2 million in new annual business from companies that had previously worked with Thornton. Several of Thornton's key suppliers had also established relationships with the Midwest. And Thornton's operations were struggling with supply chain problems that hadn't existed when I was managing their supplier relationships and client logistics. On November 18, 2024, I received a certified letter from Thornton Manufacturing's attorneys. The letter alleged that I had violated my non-compete agreement by soliciting Thornton's clients and suppliers, causing substantial damage to Thornton's business. The letter demanded that I cease all contact with any companies that had previously worked with Thornton and that I pay $500,000 in damages for breach of contract. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, Elizabeth Morrison, who specialized in employment law and non-compete disputes. "Did you solicit any of these clients or suppliers?" Elizabeth asked. "No. I received calls from people I'd worked with for years asking where I'd gone after leaving Thornton. I told them where I was working. Some of them independently decided to contact Midwest Industrial to explore business relationships. I didn't encourage them, didn't offer incentives, didn't disparage Thornton. I just answered questions honestly and let them make their own decisions. Do you have documentation of these contacts? Phone records showing they called me, not me calling them. Email records showing they initiated contact. And Midwest's CRM system showed. They reached out to our sales team independently to request quotes and information. Good. Keep everything. We're probably going to need it. On December 3, 2024, Thornton Manufacturing filed a lawsuit in Indiana State Court against me and Midwest Industrial Solutions, alleging breach of non-compete agreement, tortious interference with business relationships, and unfair competition. They claimed damages of $3 million based on lost business revenue and claimed that I had systematically solicited Thornton's clients and suppliers to damage Thornton's business operations. The lawsuit included a request for a preliminary injunction that would prohibit me from working in supply chain roles for any manufacturing company in Indiana for the duration of the non-compete period, essentially asking the court to prevent me from working in my profession for 2 years. Elizabeth filed our response on December 20, 2024. Our defense was straightforward: I had not solicited anyone. The non-compete agreement prohibited solicitation, which required active encouragement or inducement to switch business relationships. Clients and suppliers had independently contacted me and Midwest Industrial after experiencing declining service quality from Thornton. Their decisions to explore alternative suppliers were based on business considerations, not my solicitation. We also argued that Thornton's damages claims were inflated and unsupported. They claimed $3 million in losses but provided no evidence that those losses were caused by my actions rather than by their own operational problems after replacing me with someone who couldn't maintain the relationships and service quality I'd provided for 15 years. The preliminary injunction hearing was scheduled for January 15, 2025. Elizabeth and I prepared our case carefully. We collected phone records, email records, and CRM documentation showing that clients and suppliers had initiated contact with me, not vice versa. We prepared testimony from several clients explaining why they'd chosen to explore working with Midwest, primarily because Thornton's service quality had declined after my departure. We also prepared evidence showing that Thornton's operational problems predated any client or supplier departures. Kyle Patterson, my replacement, had struggled to manage supplier relationships effectively. Several suppliers had complained about delayed responses and unclear communications. Thornton's on-time delivery rate had declined from 98.7% under my management to 91.3% under Kyle's management. Client complaints had increased significantly. The hearing took place on January 15, 2025 in Marion County Superior Court. Thornton's attorney argued that I had systematically destroyed Thornton's supply chain by stealing clients and suppliers through improper solicitation. They presented evidence of business losses and claimed that I had violated both the letter and spirit of the non-compete agreement. Elizabeth presented our defense. She showed phone records proving clients and suppliers had called me, not me calling them. She presented email records showing they had initiated contact. She called David Chen from Precision Manufacturing as a witness. Mr. Chen, why did your company stop using Thornton Manufacturing as a supplier? Elizabeth asked. Service quality declined significantly after Jennifer left, David testified. Deliveries became unreliable. Communication became poor. We experienced problems that never occurred when Jennifer managed our account. We contacted Midwest Industrial to explore alternatives because we needed reliable supply, not because anyone solicited us. Did Jennifer Hayes contact you to encourage switching to Midwest Industrial? No. We called her after experiencing problems with Thornton. She told us where she was working but didn't encourage us to switch. We made that decision independently based on service quality concerns. Similar testimony came from other clients and suppliers. They'd left Thornton because service quality declined, not because I'd solicited them. They'd contacted me and Midwest Industrial independently because they valued the relationships and service quality they'd experienced when I managed supply chain operations. Judge Patricia Williams listened to 3 days of testimony before issuing her ruling on January 22, 2025. The court finds that Ms. Hayes did not violate the non-compete agreement, Judge Williams stated. The agreement prohibited solicitation of clients and suppliers. Solicitation requires active encouragement or inducement to switch business relationships. The evidence shows that clients and suppliers independently contacted Ms. Hayes and Midwest Industrial after experiencing service quality problems with Thornton Manufacturing. Responding honestly to inquiries about where one is working does not constitute solicitation. The court further finds that Thornton Manufacturing's business losses resulted primarily from their own operational failures after Ms. Hayes' departure, not from any improper actions by Ms. Hayes. The evidence shows a significant decline in service quality, delivery performance, and client satisfaction under Thornton's new supply chain management. These operational problems caused clients and suppliers to seek alternative partners. The request for preliminary injunction is denied. Ms. Hayes is free to continue working in her profession without restriction beyond the terms of the non-compete agreement, which she has not violated. The ruling was a complete victory. No injunction. No findings of violation. No damages owed. But the case wasn't over. Thornton's attorneys filed an appeal, and the full trial on damages was scheduled for June 2025. They were still claiming $3 million in damages and still alleging that I had improperly interfered with their business relationships. Elizabeth and I spent the next 5 months preparing for trial. We collected extensive evidence of Thornton's operational problems after my departure. We documented the service quality issues that had caused clients to leave. We prepared expert testimony about supply chain management and the importance of relationships and institutional knowledge in maintaining service quality. The trial began on June 9, 2025. Thornton presented their case first. Gregory Thornton testified that my departure had devastated the company's supply chain operations and that my actions at Midwest Industrial had stolen critical business relationships. Under cross-examination, Elizabeth questioned Gregory about his own management decisions. Mr. Thornton, when Ms. Hayes requested a salary adjustment to market rates in June 2024, what was your response? I told her she was replaceable and that replaceable employees don't command premium salaries. And after she resigned, did you attempt to retain her? No. Why not? Because I believed we could replace her capabilities with adequate supply chain management. And how has that worked out? Gregory hesitated. We've experienced some challenges. Your on-time delivery rate declined from 98.7% to 91.3% after Ms. Hayes left, correct? There was some decline, yes. Client complaints increased by 41%, correct? We had some client service issues. And multiple clients left Thornton and began working with competitors, correct? Yes. Did those clients leave because Ms. Hayes solicited them, or because they experienced service quality problems? I believe she influenced their decisions. Do you have evidence of her contacting them to encourage switching suppliers? She told them where she was working. When they called her to ask. After experiencing service problems with Thornton. Correct? Gregory didn't answer immediately. Elizabeth continued, Mr. Thornton, you told Ms. Hayes she was replaceable. You replaced her with someone earning $16,000 less per year with no existing industry relationships. That replacement struggled to maintain service quality. Clients experienced problems and independently sought alternative suppliers. That's not solicitation. That's natural consequences of replacing someone who wasn't actually replaceable with someone who couldn't do the job as effectively. We presented our case over 3 days. I testified about my 15 years at Thornton, the relationships I'd built, and my careful adherence to non-compete terms after leaving. We presented testimony from clients and suppliers explaining why they'd left Thornton, service quality problems, not solicitation. We presented expert testimony about supply chain management explaining that relationships and institutional knowledge can't be easily replaced. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning their verdict on June 16, 2025. We find in favor of the defendant, Jennifer Hayes, on all counts. We find that Ms. Hayes did not breach the non-compete agreement, did not tortiously interfere with business relationships, and did not engage in unfair competition. We find that Thornton Manufacturing's business losses resulted from their own operational failures, not from any improper actions by Ms. Hayes. Complete victory. No damages owed. No violations found. And most importantly, legal precedent establishing that clients and suppliers choosing to follow a supply chain professional to a new company based on service quality concerns does not constitute solicitation or breach of non-compete terms. But the jury wasn't finished. We further find that Thornton Manufacturing's lawsuit was frivolous and brought in bad faith as retaliation against Ms. Hayes for leaving the company after being told she was replaceable. We award Ms. Hayes $180,000 in attorney's fees and costs. Gregory Thornton sat at the plaintiff's table looking like someone who just realized that calling someone replaceable and then suing them for $3 million when they turn out to be irreplaceable was an expensive mistake. The final cost to Thornton Manufacturing, approximately $520,000 in legal fees, $180,000 in awarded costs to me, lost business revenue of approximately $4.2 million annually, continued operational problems from inadequate supply chain management, and the reputational damage from losing a public lawsuit that established they'd retaliated against a long-term employee for resigning after being undervalued. I ran into Gregory in the courthouse lobby after the verdict. He was walking with his attorneys toward the exit, looking exhausted and defeated. "Jennifer," he said, stopping when he saw me. "Gregory. I didn't expect this outcome. You didn't expect that clients and suppliers valued 15 years of reliable service more than they valued staying with your company after service quality declined?" I asked. "Or you didn't expect that telling someone they're replaceable and then suing them for $3 million when they're not actually replaceable would cost you $500,000 in legal fees and a public verdict proving you were wrong?" "I thought you'd violated the non-compete," Gregory said. "I thought you'd actively recruited our clients. I answered my phone when people I'd worked with for a decade called to ask where I'd gone after leaving Thornton. That's not recruitment. That's maintaining professional relationships. The difference is that you thought supply chain work was transactional and replaceable. It's not. It's relational and built on trust and performance over time. When you replaced me with someone who couldn't maintain those relationships, service quality declined. When clients experienced problems, they sought alternatives. That's not solicitation. That's the consequences." "The jury believed that," Gregory said quietly. "The jury looked at the evidence. On-time delivery rates declined from 98.7% to 91.3%. Client complaints increased by 41%. Suppliers complaining about poor communication and delayed responses. They saw that your business problems started with your operational failures, not with my actions. Then they saw that you spent $520,000 in legal fees trying to blame me for problems you created by telling me I was replaceable and then discovering I wasn't." Gregory didn't respond. "You had 15 years of institutional knowledge, supplier relationships, and client service excellence available to you for $115,000 per year," I continued. "Market rate for the value I provided. You chose to call me replaceable rather than pay market rates. You replaced me with someone earning $78,000 who couldn't maintain the relationships and service quality your business depended on. Then you blamed me when clients and suppliers chose to work with companies that provided better service. The court just told you that's not how non-compete agreements work, and it cost you $500,000 to learn that lesson." "I made mistakes," Gregory admitted. "You made assumptions," I said. "You assumed supply chain work was replaceable because you didn't understand the relationships and institutional knowledge required to do it well. You assumed clients stayed with Thornton because of your company, not because of the service quality I provided. You assumed that telling someone they're replaceable and then replacing them would work out fine. You were wrong about all of it, and it cost your company millions of dollars in lost business plus legal fees." Gregory walked away without responding. I left the courthouse with Elizabeth, who was carrying the signed court order awarding attorney's fees. "That was satisfying," Elizabeth said. "It was necessary," I replied. "Not satisfying. Necessary." Gregory needed to learn that relationships matter more than he thought, that institutional knowledge isn't easily replaceable, and that suing former employees for $3 million because clients independently chose to follow them creates expensive legal precedents that prove you were wrong. Here's what they don't teach you about non-compete agreements: they protect employers from solicitation and improper interference, not from natural consequences of poor management decisions. When you tell someone they're replaceable, replace them with someone less capable, watch your service quality decline, and then blame the person who left when clients seek better alternatives. That's not a non-compete violation, that's operational failure. Gregory thought replaceable meant that anyone with supply chain experience could do my job. What it actually meant was that the technical skills were replaceable, but the relationships, institutional knowledge, and service quality I'd built over 15 years were not. Kyle Patterson could learn Thornton's systems. He couldn't replicate the supplier trust I'd earned through 12 years of honoring commitments. He couldn't replicate the client confidence I'd built through 8 years of solving problems quickly and reliably. The math is simple. Thornton paid me $94,000 annually to maintain $47 million in supply chain operations with 98.7% on-time delivery and minimal client complaints. Gregory replaced me with someone earning $78,000 who couldn't maintain those performance levels. Service quality declined, clients left, suppliers struggled with poor communication, and Thornton's annual revenue decreased by approximately $4.2 million. Then Gregory spent $520,000 in legal fees trying to blame me for problems caused by his own decision to replace irreplaceable capabilities with inadequate management. The lawsuit cost him $3 million in claims plus $520,000 in legal fees plus $180,000 in awarded costs to me, a total of $700,000 in direct costs, plus the $4.2 million in annual business lost because he couldn't maintain the service quality I'd provided for 15 years. You want to tell someone they're replaceable after 15 years of service? Go ahead. But make sure they actually are replaceable before you discover that transactional work is actually relational work, that institutional knowledge matters more than you think, and that clients and suppliers value consistent service quality more than they value staying with companies that can't maintain it. Gregory learned this lesson in a courtroom with a jury telling him his lawsuit was frivolous and awarding me attorney's fees for the trouble of defending against $3 million in retaliatory claims. He learned that replaceable is a word you should only use when you're certain you can actually replace someone's capabilities without destroying the service quality your business depends on. I kept my CRV with 168,934 miles. I kept my filing cabinets with 15 years of supplier agreements and client contracts. I kept the relationships I'd built through consistent performance and reliable service, because those relationships existed with me as a professional, not with Thornton as a company. Midwest Industrial Solutions grew by $4.2 million in annual revenue within 6 months of hiring me. Our supply chain operations maintained 98.9% on-time delivery rates. Our clients were satisfied. Our suppliers were reliable. And I was earning $125,000 annually, 33% more than Thornton had paid me, plus equity participation in a company that understood supply chain operations were strategic capabilities rather than replaceable transactions. Gregory called me replaceable and offered to pay $16,000 less for my replacement. The market proved I was worth $125,000. The jury proved that clients and suppliers following me wasn't solicitation, it was natural consequences of poor service quality at Thornton. And the final judgment proved that suing someone for being irreplaceable after you told them they were replaceable costs more than just paying them market rates in the first place. Thornton Manufacturing still operates, but their supply chain struggles continue. Kyle Patterson left after 8 months when he realized he couldn't fix the operational problems he'd inherited. Gregory hired another replacement at $85,000, trying to split the difference between what he'd paid me and what market rates demanded. That person lasted 6 months before leaving for a company that valued supply chain expertise appropriately. Last I heard, Gregory was managing supply chain operations himself because he couldn't retain qualified directors at the salaries he was willing to pay. Turns out that telling someone they're replaceable and then proving they're not creates reputation problems that make it harder to hire the next person. Meanwhile, I'm building supply chain operations at Midwest Industrial that create competitive advantages through supplier relationships, client service quality, and operational excellence. The work is the same work I did at Thornton for 15 years. The difference is that Mark Davidson understands its value, compensates it appropriately, and doesn't call people replaceable when they ask for market rate salaries. The verdict document sits in my home office file cabinets, right next to 15 years of Thornton Manufacturing documentation. It's a legal precedent establishing that when you replace someone who wasn't actually replaceable, and service quality declines, and clients independently seek better alternatives, that's not a non-compete violation. That's natural market forces responding to operational failures. Gregory wanted $3 million in damages for me being irreplaceable after he called me replaceable. The jury gave him a verdict proving he was wrong and a bill for $180,000 in my legal fees. Sometimes the most expensive words a CEO can say are, "You're replaceable," especially when they're wrong and everyone except the CEO already knows it. Replaceable? Tell that to the court. Tell that to the jury that deliberated for 6 hours and decided that 15 years of institutional knowledge, supplier relationships, and client service excellence weren't replaceable by someone earning $78,000 with no industry connections. Tell that to the clients who left because service quality declined. Tell that to the suppliers who struggled with poor communication after I left. Or tell that to Gregory, who's now managing his own supply chain operations because he can't find qualified directors willing to work for below-market salaries at a company that publicly lost a lawsuit proving their former director was irreplaceable despite being told otherwise. I was replaceable, Gregory said. The $4.2 million in lost annual revenue, the $700,000 in legal costs, and the jury verdict proving his lawsuit was frivolous retaliation suggest that he was wrong. Sometimes the person keeping the trains running is the person keeping the trains running, and when you replace them with someone who can't, the trains stop running efficiently and clients find other trains that arrive on time. 15 years of loyalty ended with one word, replaceable. The lawsuit ended with a different word, irreplaceable. And Gregory paid $700,000 to learn the difference.